Do you ever wonder if you're eating too much salt?
It's 1 billion people globally actually have high blood pressure. And the first line of treatment is actually to reduce your salt.
And have you ever tried to cut down?
The next day when we started the new diet, we said, it's disgusting, really. My parents, my siblings and their families, they think we are really crazy.
This is The Food Chain from the BBC World Service with me, Ruth Alexander. And this week we're finding out what happens when you eat salt.
The sodium ions go from the pretzel into the cells and make a spark. It's kind of an amazing thing.
Wow. It's like my tongue is alive with
Exactly.
flavour.
So it brings everything out.
We'll be looking at how much is too much, how to cook with it and without it. First, let's have some brunch. This is the expert chopping of Dan Barber, chef at Food Sorcery Cooking School in Manchester, England. So what are you cooking us today?
So I'm going to do a shakshuka, which is a baked eggs dish with tomatoes, onions, chilli, garlic, coriander, some avocado, some lime to finish, and lots of lovely salt.
Like, how important is salt to you as a chef?
I think salt defines the difference between a chef and a cook, really. I mean, a chef's pinch is very different sometimes to a home cook's pinch of salt. My pinch can occasionally look like a handful of salt. Depending if I'm seasoning water to blanch vegetables, for example, then that pinch of salt becomes a handful of salt. I think the only reason that would be bad is if you were drinking the blanching water afterwards.
So it makes food taste better?
In my opinion. Well, in everybody's opinion, I think salt makes food taste better, but I think you have to be careful not to over-season, yeah?
You say that like it's simple. How do you know what is over-seasoning?
I think years of training, sort of subconsciously, you learn about it as you go along, because it is in everything. It's sort of installed into you from an early age, or from an early part of your training. So I'm going to start cooking now, okay? So at this stage, we're going to season this. You season in layers, okay? So you notice then when I seasoned, it wasn't too much. That was a pinch, okay?
That was quite a generous pinch.
That was quite a generous pinch, but I'm a chef, I can't help it, yeah?
And then you're going to add a little bit more later.
A little bit more later, yeah, probably a lot more later, yeah, but you'll be the judge of whether it's nice or not, or whether it's or over-seasoned. At this stage, then, we're going to go in with our tomatoes, okay? So, and then we're just going to mix those up. Now, it's quite important with tomatoes that you use a little bit of sugar as well as salt, okay? So the sugar is going to obviously bring out or add to the sweetness of the tomatoes.
And what's the salt going to do?
So the salt is going to, in my opinion, identify all the different flavours.
I see.
Yeah.
So it's not that we're going to be tasting salt, you think? We're going to be tasting the tomatoes more?
Exactly, yeah. So it just complement it, to be able to pick it all up. We're going to have a little taste. So, having tasted that now, it could do with some more salt, okay?
You felt it could do with more. I was two pinches there. Two more pinches, listener.
2 more pinches of salt, okay?
So you're thinking about not just how much to salt, but when to salt.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. So the next thing we're going to do is move on to our flatbread, okay? So we have got bread flour and water, okay?
So this is going to be a flatbread.
This is going to be a flatbread, okay?
Is it true? I've heard that you need to put salt in bread, not just for the flavour, but actually for the structure of it. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Not so much in the flatbread that we're making now, but certainly in sourdoughs or anything with yeast that's going to rise. So salt goes into your yeast and water mix when you're making it as well, so it'll react, okay?
As a chef, have you ever had, the waiter come to the kitchen and say, table 6, they don't want any salt added to their food?
Yes, certainly.
How do you feel about that?
No, I don't have an issue with it. I understand why chefs do sometimes, purely because, you spend all this time making these dishes for somebody to say, I don't want salt, okay, so what's the point, But, I mean, I'm not that sort of chef, but I do know chefs that are.
But would you privately think when you're serving up the food?
Yeah, privately, you go in, you really want to season it up properly as you would a chef, and you start thinking, what's the point of me being here, sort of thing.
Dan Barber. So why do we like the taste of salt so much? I asked Paul Breslin, Professor of Nutritional Sciences at Rutgers University, member of the Bernal Chemical Senses Centre, a smell and taste sensory research institute in Philadelphia, the United States.
Salt is necessary for life. It is necessary for cells to function. It's especially important to electrically active cells, which includes all of our neurons, our brain, our spine, all of our muscles. And it's also an incredibly important integral component to skin and bone. And we don't really have the same kind of physiological mechanisms to store it and draw upon it when we need it like we do calcium. So when we run low on sodium, there's really only one solution for us, which is we have to go find it and eat it.
And if we don't, we die.
If we don't, we die. We need it for life, and so it's something that we always seek out, we like innately, and we value very much, even culturally.
How do we taste it? Like, what's happening in the mouth?
There is a microorgan, which is a cluster of about 100 to 120 cells that make up what we call a taste bud. They're all over the tongue and the soft palate and the throat. And they're microscopic, and in these cells are cells that tend to specialize for different qualities of taste. The cells that specialize in salt have mechanisms for responding to salt that are known to us, and then there are some that we're still trying to figure out now. One of the mechanisms for tasting salt is through ion channels. But what's remarkable about this mechanism is that when you bite into a salty pretzel, the sodium ions that are making up those salt crystals will dissolve into your saliva, and those same sodium ions will pass through one of these channels, going from the pretzel inside the cells in a taste bud and directly activate the cell electrically from that flow of ions into the cell. It makes a little electrical spark. It's kind of an amazing thing.
So your body and your mind gets excited when you taste salt?
Both electrically, literally, and of course, yes, figuratively.
But people will say, oh, there's no salt on this steak, I can't taste it. I mean, are they right? Does salt enhance other flavors?
Yes, so chefs generally understand that a very small amount of salt, a pinch of salt in an entire dish, brings out flavors. And people have long argued that salt is a flavor enhancer. And it probably doesn't by itself enhance anything. It's more likely a suppressor, particularly for off notes in food, for bitterness. But the act of doing that can make some of the more positive notes, like sweetness or savoriness, get stronger. And, an example of this is grapefruit. Some people actually like to salt like a half a grapefruit if they eat it for breakfast. And by doing that, they'll be suppressing some of the bitterness, and the sweetness will, under that circumstance, get stronger.
So it's not so much a flavor enhancer, it's a flavor disguiser. Curious.
Yes.
It's quite intriguing, salt, isn't it?
Yes, and in a baked good, it's going to have even more to do. So the browning reactions of anything from making cookies to baking a loaf of bread to even grilling meats like a steak, those aromas and those chemical reactions in the food that make it turn brown need salt for them to occur. So if you made a loaf of bread without adding any salt to it, the bread will come out looking extremely pale. It won't smell like a fresh baked loaf of bread because those browning reactions also give it that aroma.
Golly, that's the salt doing that.
It's really amazing all the different roles salt plays in food.
Professor Paul Breslin. You're listening to The Food Chain from the BBC World Service with me, Ruth Alexander. This week, what happens when you eat salt? So salt makes food taste, feel, look, and even smell better. Only trouble is, we're told to eat less of it. Why? I asked Claire Collins, Professor of Nutrition and Dietetics at the University of Newcastle in Australia.
So when you have too much salt, the first thing your body can do is it says, I'm going to dilute you. So it retains water, so your blood pressure's got to have a little bit of a kick along to pump all this fluid around your body, and that's actually why your blood pressure goes up.
And what are the impacts over time?
Yeah, well, the impacts over time are devastating. So if you kind of think of your arteries like the same way you might think about your garden hose, if you get your hose out every day and you just turn it on at a nice volume and you water all your plants, your hose is going to last forever and ever. But if every day you turn that hose on full bore, like a fire hydrant amount of water blasting through your garden hose, well, that garden hose is not going to last very long. And so essentially, that's what's happening in your arteries. And then if you've got any weaknesses in any of those blood vessels, like in your brain, that can burst and you could have a stroke.
So how much salt is too much salt?
Well, this is where there's a slight difference in recommendations around the world. In the UK, your target is 6 grams per day, and 5 or 6 grams is a teaspoon. Like completely level, it's 5 grams, a little bit rounded, it's 6 grams. In Australia, our target is 5 grams. But you're already way ahead in your average intake. The average intake of salt in the UK is 8 grams per day. In Australia, we're 9 grams per day. But when you look around the whole world, the average for the whole world is actually closer to 11 grams. So at the whole world level, we need to halve our salt intake.
And that's been done in the UK through regulation. The government has said to companies, you need to reduce how much salt you're putting in this processed food.
Yeah, absolutely. Anywhere between 2/3 to 3/4 of salt actually comes from the processed foods. But what was really clever about your country, and why I think the UK is an example for the world, is that most people living there don't know that. It wasn't like, today you're allowed to have regular salt in your food and tomorrow we're cutting it down by 50%. It was kind of done by stealth. Population blood pressures went down, and then the healthcare costs started to decrease because, they started to be able to model the cases that never happened, the strokes that didn't happen, the heart disease that didn't happen, the kidney disease that didn't happen.
It's worth noting that some recent evaluation of the UK's salt strategy have found that progress has plateaued, and that after average daily intake fell by almost 2 grams to a low of around 7.5 grams, it crept up again. But the Department of Health pointed out there was an overall decrease between 2000 and 2018-19 of around a gram, taking average daily intake from 9.4 grams to 8.4 grams. It also said that changes in levels in products are monitored by government, with data showing that levels have reduced by up to 20% in some products. But I wonder, what's the minimum amount of salt the body needs?
Well, the minimum is like you're not going to live if you get 1 gram of salt or less per day. But the problems start kicking in when you're getting to the above 8, 9, 10, or that world average 11. It's 1 billion people globally actually have high blood pressure. And the first line of treatment is actually to reduce your salt.
So why has 5 grams been chosen as the international recommended limit? We asked the World Health Organization, and it says it's based on a review of the scientific literature, which found that sodium intake below 2 grams, or 5 grams of salt, resulted in a decrease in resting blood pressure, risk of stroke, and fatal coronary heart disease. It's also true that sodium affects different people differently. There's genetic variation in terms of how individuals process it.
I think you just got to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Like arguing whether it should be 5 grams or 6 grams, the issue is that around the world, salt intakes are very high, contributing to high blood pressure, contributing to premature strokes, premature mortality, and we need to address it in a way that's culturally appropriate for each country and in a stepwise, sequential way so that it's realistic. It's not come in with a big stick and that's it, all the salt's chucked in the bin and that's it. And then also recognising that you don't want to set a target. That means in some countries, people would then not have enough salt and be at risk of things like getting dehydrated because the global target has been set too low.
But if you want to monitor how much salt you're eating, how can you?
It's really challenging to know exactly how much salt you as an individual are eating. And one of the reasons for that is the gold standard is how much salt appears in your urine. But in order to do that, you'd have to go down to your doctor. To get an approximation of your salt intake is actually to use a food diary or a food app that includes sodium in its database. Now, it's also not going to be perfectly accurate, but it will be able to tell you whether your sodium intake is just off the Richter scale or whether, in fact, you don't have a very high sodium intake pretty much at all.
So it's difficult to know for sure how much salt you're eating. What do you think the point of a salt target is?
Well, these sorts of recommendations are really important for country-level monitoring. And at the international level, they help with comparing progress between countries. So I think we've got to be really careful that we don't overburden people and going, well, you must know your sodium intake. I'd like to think people didn't tie themselves up in knots going, oh, how much salt is in this? How much salt is in that? Rather step back and look at the bigger picture. How am I able to replace some of the foods that are more processed in convenience, maybe with meals I make from scratch, or maybe 1 week for each product category, like bread, I'm just going to spend an extra 5 minutes in the bread aisle, turn all those labels over and see how much sodium I get in one slice, and I'm going to pick the one that's a bit lower than what I usually pick.
And if you are cooking your meals from scratch, should you be adding any salt?
Nope. Add herbs and spices.
Professor Claire Collins, what's it like to try to drastically cut down on the amount of salt you're eating in a country with one of the world's saltiest diets? Mariam Sarbaeva lives in Astana, the capital of Kazakhstan, where studies have estimated that people eat on average 17 grams of salt a day, more than 3 times the amount recommended by the WHO. I asked Mariam what people there like to eat.
Well, lots of meat, and once again meat. Due to the weather conditions, you know that in winter you cannot be a vegetarian. Here it's quite impossible. It's highly calorie, lots of fat, lots of meat, and not very many vegetables.
And it's one of the saltiest diets in the world, apparently. Can you tell me how salt features in the diet?
We consume lots of salt, which is due to historical heritage, because when we were nomads, for centuries and centuries, we traveled and wandered across the steppes, and here we had to carry lots of meat, which could be preserved only adding salt. And even the milk products, the dairy products, are also very much salty for the same reasons. The family would stock up on meat in early winter, say November, and they would have, believe it or not, a cow, a whole cow, and maybe half a horse, plus a sheep.
Where would they keep that?
On their balcony, just salted in the snow, because the winters are cold here.
8 years ago, Mariam's daughter had some health issues, and the doctor advised them to cut down on foods that are high in sugar, fat, and salt. She stopped adding salt to their food overnight.
The next day, when we started the new diet, we said, it's disgusting, really, because it was so much unusual, and you try the food, but you practically do not recognize it. And when there is no salt, everything tastes different. But without salt, you can taste, feel, smell the real food. For example, oh, that's broccoli, that's a tomato, that's a cucumber, and they look, taste, feel, smell absolutely different.
Within a few weeks, she and her daughter got used to it.
When you tried your food, you can clearly taste a wonderful combination of different flavors, of different tastes, and it's so unusual, really.
What do friends and family think about your new diet?
As for my extended family, with my parents, my siblings and their families, they think we are really crazy.
What do they say?
Yeah, they cannot eat the food we cook. They say, wow, it's so unusual and strange. They say, where's salt? And they add lots of salt, which is so unusual for us, for me and my daughter.
And what about when you go to eat at your relatives' houses or friends?
You have to be polite. Visiting someone, that's why we say that the food is delicious. We try but not eat too much, unless it's so much delicious that we cannot resist. In such a case, we eat a lot.
Oh, so you do have your weak moments. Which
Sure.
which foods can't you resist?
Oh, speaking in general, I cannot resist Kazakh national food, which is yet kamar. It means the boiled meat with a kind of pasta, which is flat, like lasagna. And also we have the national sausages, shuzhuk or kaze. They're horse meat or beef sausages. They are salty. That's the most delicious food ever.
The World Health Organization has flagged up that people in Kazakhstan are typically eating far more salt, more than 3 times the recommended amount of salt in a day. And your government says that it wants people to cut down. Do you think people are going to listen?
Well, it depends on the age, I believe, because younger generation in our country try to keep to a healthy lifestyle, reducing fats, extra salt or sugar. But speaking of elderly people, I do not believe that they would listen that much. If I ask my mom, for example, to cook national dishes with less salt, she would say, no way, it won't be delicious. How come? We have been cooking it with that amount of salt for all our lives. That's nonsense. If I put less salt, it won't be so tasty. 8 years ago, when I started cooking using no salt at all or no sugar, people were shocked. And they say, how come? How can you eat such food? It's tasteless, it's disgusting. But nowadays, more and more often, when I say how I cook, people say, oh, that's same with me. Oh, I do the same. And I can hear that more and more often. It's really inspiring. It gives the hope that something can be done, that the society is becoming more and more aware and conscious.
Do you worry about your older relatives who continue to eat salty food?
Sure, I do, because my parents are in their early 70s, and sure, with the age they have some diseases like heart diseases or blood pressure. And whenever I try to prove that unhealthy lifestyle, the food, excessive carbohydrates or fats, too nourishing food in the late hours during the day wouldn't do them good but would harm them, they say, oh, life is too short, you have to enjoy life. They say that's really very saddening, because I know that something can be changed. For example, if they just change their diet, they would suffer from these diseases less.
Mariam Sabayeva in Kazakhstan. Back in Manchester, it's the salt taste test with chef Dan Barber. Here I have then 2 plates before me, both look delicious. One without so much salt,
Yeah.
and one salted as you would.
As I would do to present.
Okay.
Okay. So as a finished product, as a finished dish, finish it with a little bit of rock salt on the avocado, a little bit on the eggs, and the lime juice.
So this is just avocado on its own.
Just plain old avocado. It is what it is.
Yeah, it's
I'll
nice.
try it with lime and rock salt.
Wow. It's like my tongue is alive with
Exactly.
flavour.
So it brings everything out, you know. So not only have you got the lime, which is going to be zingy, it's going to wake your mouth up. The salt is going to make every single part of your tongue work. So exactly the same, dude. If you do the same thing with the eggs now. So you tried the eggs unseasoned in the pan.
Okay, so this is the unseasoned egg.
Yeah.
And now the seasoned. Salt, coriander and...
Salt, coriander, a little bit of lime.
Okay. Yeah, there's a whole world of flavour going on
it's
now.
so different. So that's the difference, in my opinion, like I was saying before, the difference between a chef and a cook.
It's not salt I'm tasting, it's egg. I'm tasting egg.
Yeah.
Whereas if I go back to the
You're just tasting
unseasoned...
that you're just getting the texture
Yeah.
with that one, which is quite interesting, isn't it?
It is, yeah, that's
It's come
amazing.
from the same pan. It's that you sort of get cooked together. It's not. There's no trickery involved. It's it is exactly the same thing. I've just seasoned this one.
So if someone can't have salt, what would your tips be for how to make a tasty dish? I mean, can you make tasty food without salt?
Of course you can, yeah. But I'd get some pretty strong flavours in there. I mean, it's going to be. I mean, scrambled eggs are going to be pretty boring.
What would you do with them without salt?
Well, without salt, there's not really much you can do. But you could spice them up. Get some chili in there. You know, make them Mexican eggs or whatever. You know, put some chorizo in there. You know, make them a little bit more interesting.
Well, that's got salt in there, hasn't it?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
That's cheating.
Yeah, use things with salt in. That's we don't need as much salt as I've used on here, on every meal. Okay, but it's nice.
It's so nice.
It's delicious. Yeah.
Dan Barber, thanks to him and to everyone we spoke to for today's programme. How do you season to taste? You can let us know by emailing thefoodchain@bbc.co.uk. You might also like to listen to our episode, How Did Salt Get So Gourmet? Search online for the BBC Food Chain podcast. From me and the rest of the team, Hannah Bewley and Beatrice Pickup, thanks for listening, and join us again next week.